Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that grips the heart and leaves you thinking long after it ends. It begins in a quiet neighborhood where a boy's laughter used to echo through the walls, until everything changed. He was barely 10 when his father remarried. The new man in the house wasn't kind. He came with polished shoes and a sharp tongue, the kind that could slice through any child's confidence. At first, the boy thought it was just strictness. Maybe he was trying to make him strong. But soon, the truth showed its teeth. Mornings became battles. If the boy didn't greet fast enough, he got punished. If he didn't arrange the chairs in perfect alignment, he was shouted at. Even the way he breathed seemed to annoy the men. His mother often stood by helpless, caught between love and fear. One rainy evening, the boy came home late from school because he stayed behind to clean the classroom. The stepfather was waiting at the door, belt already in hand. He didn't ask questions. He didn't listen. He just raised his hand. That night, the sound of the belt echoed louder than the thunder outside. Something shifted in the boy's heart. He stopped smiling as much. He stopped playing with the other children. He learned to tiptoe through life, careful not to upset the man who treated him like a burden. But even in his silence, he noticed things. The way the stepfather always locked one room and never let anyone inside. The way he made secret phone calls at night. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his face carried a strange fear. The boy didn't know it yet, but the pain he was enduring was leading to something bigger, something that would change everything. Days rolled into weeks, and the house slowly became a place of quiet fear. The boy moved like a shadow, always watching, always calculating his next step. His mother tried to comfort him at night, whispering that things would get better, but even her voice carried doubt. The stepfather's rules grew stranger by the day. He insisted that no one should touch the locked room. He would clean it himself, late at night, always after everyone had slept. One night, the boy woke up to fetch water and saw a dim light coming from that room. He crept closer, barefoot, his heartbeat loud in his ears. Through the small gap in the door, he saw stacks of wrapped bundles, something that looked like money, and a strange wooden box with carvings he didn't understand. Before he could look longer, the door creaked. The men turned sharply. Their eyes met for a split second. Fear gripped the boy. He ran back to his room, heart pounding like a drum. The next morning, breakfast was silent. The man's stare lingered on him longer than usual, cold and sharp. The boy knew he'd been caught. That day, he walked on eggshells, avoiding every corner, every sound. But curiosity doesn't die easily. It sits quietly, waiting. The boy began to notice the visitors who came at odd hours, men in dark clothes, speaking in low tones, leaving quickly. He didn't understand their conversations, but he could feel something was wrong. One afternoon, when his mother went to the market and the stepfather wasn't home yet, the boy sneaked into the locked room. His hands trembled as he pushed the door slowly. Inside, he found bags of cash, documents he couldn't read, and the same carved box now open, empty. Just as he turned to leave, he heard the gate slam. Panic rushed through him. The man was back. There was no time to hide. The boy froze as footsteps approached the room. His breath hitched. His heart raced. That was the day everything shifted. The boy's legs stiffened as the footsteps drew closer. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a hiding spot. The wardrobe was too small, the table too open, and the window had rusted shut. The door creaked. The man stepped in slowly, his sharp eyes scanning the room like a hunter spotting movement in tall grass. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then their eyes locked. "What are you doing here?" The man's voice was low, almost calm, but the danger in it was heavy. The boy's mouth went dry. He couldn't speak. He tried to step back, but his heel hit the table, shaking the carved box. The man's face hardened. In one swift motion, he grabbed the boy by the collar. "I warned you," he shouted, shaking him like a rag doll. The boy's small hands clutched the man's wrists, gasping for breath. Just then, the mother rushed in, dropping the basket she was carrying. "Please, leave him," she cried, pulling at the man's arm. But he shoved her aside, his eyes blazing. "You don't know what you've caused," he hissed at the boy, his voice trembling, not with pity, but with fear. "Do you have any idea what happens if anyone finds out?" The boy didn't understand his words, but he saw something new in the man's face: panic. Suddenly, loud knocks echoed from the gate. "Open this gate," unfamiliar voices barked. The man froze. His grip loosened. The mother's eyes widened. The knocks grew louder. Neighbors peeked through their windows, sensing drama. The man dragged the boy to the back door. "Not a word," he whispered harshly, before storming toward the front to handle the visitors. The boy and his mother exchanged terrified glances. Something serious was happening. Through the curtain, the boys saw two men in black jackets at the gate. Their expressions were firm, their presence heavy. They flashed some kind of ID before pushing the gate open. The man tried to talk his way through, laughing nervously, but the men didn't smile. The boy's heart pounded. He didn't fully understand what was unfolding, but he knew this was the beginning of the end. The compound grew tense as the men in black stepped forward. Their voices were calm but carried the kind of authority that made everyone uneasy. "We have some questions," one of them said firmly. The stepfather forced a smile, trying to mask the nervous twitch in his eyes. "Gentlemen, what's the problem?" "I'm sure we can talk," he said, laughing lightly, but his voice cracked midway. The men didn't laugh. They pushed the gate wider and entered. Neighbors started gathering at their balconies, pretending to hang clothes but watching every move. The boy and his mother stayed hidden behind the curtain, their breaths shallow. One of the officers glanced around the compound. "We've been monitoring this place for a while," he said. "Where's the locked room?" The man's smile faded instantly. He tried to act confused. "What locked room? You must be mistaken." The officer stepped closer. "Don't waste our time." The boy's heart raced. He wanted to scream, to point at the door, but fear glued his tongue. The mother held his hand tightly, silently begging him to stay quiet. The officers began searching the house. Their boots echoed against the tiles. The man followed them nervously, talking too much, laughing too loud, trying to control the situation, but it was slipping away. When they reached the locked room, he stood in front of the door, blocking their way. "There's nothing in here," he insisted. One officer signaled another. Within seconds, a sharp kick landed on the door. It flew open with a loud bang. Dust filled the air. Inside, everything was exposed: bags of cash, strange documents, and the carved box sitting on the table. The man's face went pale. He stuttered, "It's not what it looks like." But they didn't let him finish. One officer grabbed him by the arm, twisting it behind his back as the other began snapping pictures of the room. From the curtain, the boy watched with wide eyes. For the first time in a long while, he saw fear, not in himself, but in the man who had made his life miserable. Something inside him stirred. He didn't fully understand justice, but he could feel it walking through their gate that day. The man's smooth talking ended the moment the cuffs clicked around his wrists. His voice rose, wild and desperate. "You don't understand. I can explain," he shouted, struggling against the officer's grip. But his words fell flat. Neighbors had already gathered by the gate, whispering, pointing, shaking their heads. The boy stood behind the curtain, watching it all unfold like a scene from a movie he never imagined he'd live through. His mother's hand trembled as she held on to him. Her eyes were wet, not from sadness, but from the weight of everything crashing at once. As the officers led the men out, he turned his head sharply toward them. His eyes locked on the boy's. For a moment, the boy froze, remembering every harsh word, every beating, every night he wished things were different. But this time, he didn't look away. He met the man's stare boldly, like someone who had survived a storm. The officers opened the boot of their vehicle and tossed in some of the evidence they had gathered from the room. A small crowd followed them out, buzzing with questions. So he was hiding money. I knew something was off about that man. God has finally caught him. Their voices overlapped like restless birds. One officer approached the boy's mother quietly. Madam, we may need you to come to the station tomorrow to answer a few questions. You and the boy. She nodded weakly. Yes, officer. After they drove off, the compound slowly settled. The neighbors returned to their homes, still gossiping. The mother locked the gate and leaned on it, exhausted. For the first time in years, the house felt quiet. Not the fearful kind of quiet. A different one. A calm that came after thunder. The boy walked slowly into the now empty locked room. Sunlight filtered in through the broken door, falling on the piles of cash and papers left behind. He stood there silently, breathing deeply. This was the same room that once held secrets and fear. Now, it stood open, like the truth itself. He didn't say a word. But deep inside, something had shifted forever. The night after the arrest felt strangely still. The house that once echoed with angry footsteps and sharp commands now carried only the hum of crickets and the soft whistling of the wind. The boy lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid of the door creaking open. His mother sat by the window, lost in thought. The dim lantern light made the lines on her face look deeper. She wasn't crying, but her silence was heavy. So much had been hidden behind those walls, and now, everything had come spilling out like water from a cracked pot. The next morning, they dressed simply and headed to the station. The road was quiet, but people they passed whispered. Some offered sympathetic nods, others just stared. The boy walked close to his mother, unsure of what to expect. At the station, the officers were surprisingly gentle. One of them asked the boy simple questions, about the room, the visitors, the night he saw the light. His small voice trembled at first, but as he spoke, he grew steadier. It was like letting air out of a balloon that had been overfilled for too long. The officers nodded thoughtfully. You were very brave, one of them said, handing him a small bottle of water. Not every child would have noticed these things. The mother answered her own questions quietly. She admitted she had ignored the signs, hoping things would change, fearing what truth might bring. Her voice cracked when she spoke of the nights she heard the boy cry but couldn't protect him. After their statements, they stepped outside into the bright sun. The boy squinted, holding his mother's hand tightly. She looked down at him and managed a weak smile. It's over, she whispered, though her heart was still untangling itself from years of fear. As they walked back home, neighbors greeted them differently. Some offered food, others hugs. The boy felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. His world had changed so fast. But somewhere inside, he felt lighter, like a tight rope around his chest had finally been cut loose. Life after the arrest didn't return to normal immediately. The house carried memories like old cracks in a wall, visible even after a fresh coat of paint. The boy still flinched when someone spoke too loudly, and his mother sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, her heart racing for no reason. Healing, it seemed, walked with slow feet. Neighbors began visiting more often, bringing food and offering kind words. God saved you, some said. That man's true face has finally been exposed, others added. But behind their pitying smiles, the boy could sense their curiosity. Everyone wanted details, whispers to feed the neighborhood gossip. His mother remained calm but guarded. She was learning to breathe again, one day at a time. She started taking small jobs at the market, determined to rebuild what fear had scattered. The boy sometimes followed her after school, carrying small bags, observing the way she negotiated with buyers. For the first time, he began to see her strength, not just the tired woman who cried at night, but a fighter who refused to give up. At school, things were different too. Some children stared at him, whispering about what happened. A few were kind, sitting beside him and sharing their snacks. Others avoided him, as if trouble followed him around like a shadow. He learned to ignore the looks, focusing instead on his drawings. He spent hours sketching scenes from his memory: the locked room, the rainy night, the men at the gate. It was his quiet way of processing everything. One afternoon, a teacher noticed his drawings. She looked through his notebook slowly, her eyes softening. "You're very talented," she said gently. "You should keep this up." Her words settled deep in his heart. For the first time, someone saw more than just the boy who lived through a storm. They saw what he could become. At home that evening, he sat by the window, pencil in hand, sketching the sky. His mother watched him silently, a small smile on her face. The house still carried its scars, but now, hope had started to grow in the quiet corners. Months passed, and the rhythm of their lives slowly found a new beat. The boy grew taller, his steps firmer, his laughter returning in bits, soft at first, then louder, like a song remembering its melody. His mother, too, changed. She carried herself differently now, with a quiet confidence that came from surviving the fire and refusing to let it consume her. The house was repaired. The broken door was replaced, the walls repainted, the once locked room turned into a small study where the boy kept his drawings neatly stacked. Each picture was a piece of his journey, a reminder of where he had been and how far he had come. One Saturday morning, the teacher visited unexpectedly. She had brought along a stack of drawing materials and a warm smile. "I spoke with an art center," she explained. "They'd like to sponsor him for a summer program. His talent deserves to grow." The boy stared at her, stunned. No one had ever spoken about his future with such excitement before. His mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't born of fear. They were tears of pride. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "You see? God is turning everything around." At the art center, the boy found a new world, one where his hands created beauty from pain, where people clapped for him, not out of pity, but admiration. He poured his memories into colors and lines, turning shadows into pictures that spoke louder than words. The teacher often reminded him, "What happened to you doesn't define you. What you do with it does." One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange, the boy sat outside sketching. His mother joined him, their silence warm and full. She rested her hand on his shoulder, and for a moment, neither of them needed to speak. They had walked through fear, through secrets, through pain, but here they were, still standing, still breathing, still becoming. His story didn't end with the wicked stepfather. It continued with courage, healing, and a boy who found his voice through art.